And welcome back, everybody. We are going to have a small episode today with the Switchboard Soldiers book review by Jennifer Chiavari. I absolutely adored this. It took me a while to read just because I have small print, which I kind of struggled with. But I thought for a World War II novel, I was a bit curious as to what I was getting myself into, but from the beginning, Switchboard Soldiers introduces us to brave women who took part in the war effort that changed the world. They were the first step that was needed in making the army equal between men and women, and they helped to get the vote for American women. I think it was very interesting to me because it didn't just touch base on, people having to make the decision of leaving home and going back to war-torn Europe, or the sacrifices that they were going to have to make, or what they were seeing or hearing or learning. Jennifer really dives into all that, and she kind of talks about how there's a change that's going on, and a change that was needed in the world because it was very unsettled and it was a very unsure time for everybody, and people really didn't know what was going to happen in every walk of life, no matter what country you were in, because everything was sort of snowballing into each other. Each of the brave women we are introduced to shows us their courage, the human aspects of what it meant to risk their lives, and what they did to help the Allied forces with their communications and their telephones, going from convents where they stayed right down to small wooden huts with cots that leaked, that went on fire, and all these other things that kind of happened along the way. And they show the most important aspect of war, which is communication and, being aware that they needed to use certain code words, and these code words was changed, and their jobs really were their lives because they had to learn all these new codes and they had to know all these things that they needed to say. And I think Jennifer really shows that well in the series, and within this book, and I think this could have been a series. We could have seen a lot more come from this, and we could have gone on to see what the women went on to do with their lives after the war, and how either they integrated back into society or what they chose to do next. I can't imagine what it must have been like to not be able to tell their families anything, or the disconnect they must have felt from their lives back home, because that's something that I think we all take for granted now, because we text and we call and communication is so much easier, but back then they would have had to write letters and telegrams, and those would take time to get to their families, and it took time for it to get to soldiers. And I think that's something else that this book's a great reminder of, and it's a great way for us to see how far we've come and how important these sort of things are. I also kind of feel like she touches on what it would have taken to stay in Europe after the war was declared over, like what the sacrifice with that would have meant and looked like for them, and what it must have been like to make the decision to stay. And what would they have given up, and what would they have needed to look forward to, and what would have been the light at the end of the tunnel as far as they were concerned, or was there even that feeling? And I feel like Jennifer really explores those topics and looks into them. We see women who had French connections, and they sort of struggled with that very thin line of being American but also French, and the trauma of seeing their homeland so broken and devastated by war. And some, you have one that was from Belgium that was in the book, and how that affected her too. I think Jennifer was able to deliver this story with honesty and compassion, and I think she did it in such a way that it was very smooth to read, it was very engaging, it had a very impactful impression that it leaves on you, this is definitely a story that you're going to want to share with your family and your friends. You're going to want to talk about it. It's the kind of one that's really good for book club, I think, too, because I think it's going to have people really talking and wanting to share conversations and wanting to say, hey, this is a book that's interesting, or, this is what I took from it. I think everyone's going to find something different in Switchboard Soldiers, and I would be very surprised if this isn't nominated for the Historical Writing Award. And I think Jennifer did an incredible job. So that's been my thoughts on the Switchboard Soldiers. It was a 5 out of 5 read for me, and come back next week and hear what we got on the podcast, but also, really importantly, we will have more book reviews coming up, some from my personal TBR and some from the book TBR list that I have for the podcast. This has been a book that I reviewed for the podcast, and I was very honoured to do so, and I hope Jennifer sends me another one. Thank you again, and I'll speak to you all again soon.